In a quiet village surrounded by thick forests and whispering winds, there lived a young girl named Ngozi. Ngozi had no father. He had died when she was very little. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, was all she had. The woman worked tirelessly, farming, weaving, and sometimes doing odd jobs in neighboring compounds, just to make sure Ngozi never went to bed hungry. Despite their struggles, Ngozi was always cheerful. She had a soft voice, kind eyes, and a heart that forgave easily. Every evening she would sit beside her mother outside their small hut. "Mother," Ngozi would say, resting her head on her lap, "one day I will take care of you. You won't have to work so hard anymore." Mama Ngozi would smile, gently stroking her hair. "My daughter, your good heart will open doors for you. Never let anyone take that from you." But life had its own plans. One cold Harmattan morning, Mama Ngozi fell ill. The illness came quickly and quietly. Within days, she grew weak. Ngozi did everything she could, boiling herbs, fetching water, praying, but nothing worked. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Mama Ngozi held Ngozi's hand tightly. "Be strong, my child," she whispered. "No matter what happens, remain good." Those were her last words. Ngozi was alone. Days passed, and hunger became her new companion. With no one to support her, Ngozi made a difficult decision: to go to the king's palace and seek work as a domestic servant. The palace stood tall at the center of the village, guarded by high walls and stern-looking men. Ngozi walked in nervously, her heart pounding. She met the head servant, a tall woman with sharp eyes. "What do you want?" the woman asked coldly. I, I am looking for work," Ngozi replied softly. "I can clean, cook, fetch water, anything." The woman looked her up and down, then scoffed. "We don't take just anyone." But just then, an elderly palace maid stepped forward. "Let the girl try," she said calmly. "She looks hardworking." After a moment of silence, the head servant waved her hand. She said, "Let me go inform the queen." After a while, she came out and told Ngozi, "Fine, but if you fail, you're out." And just like that, Ngozi got the job. At first, things seemed to go well. Ngozi worked tirelessly, waking before dawn, sweeping the palace grounds, fetching water from the river, washing clothes, and preparing meals. She never complained, but her kindness became her problem. The other servants began to notice. "Why is she always smiling?" one whispered. "She's trying to impress the king," another sneered. "And the elders seem to like her too much," a third added. Jealousy began to grow like a dark cloud. They mocked her. They gave her extra work. Sometimes they hid her tools or blamed her for things she didn't do. Ngozi endured it all silently. Only one servant, a quiet girl named Uju, showed her a little kindness. "Be careful," Uju once whispered. "Not everyone here wants you well." Ngozi smiled gently. "I have done nothing to them." Uju looked away, troubled. "Sometimes that doesn't matter." Meanwhile, the servants are already planning evil against Ngozi. One evening, the sky turned unusually dark. The wind howled softly, and the trees swayed as if warning of something unseen. "Go fetch water from the river," the head servant ordered Ngozi. "But it's getting late." Ngozi hesitated. "Are you refusing?" the woman snapped. Ngozi quickly shook her head and picked up the clay pot. As she walked toward the river, she didn't notice the shadows moving behind her. The other servants followed quietly. At the riverbank, the water looked calm, but something about it felt wrong. Ngozi bent down to fill her pot. That was when they struck. A sudden push, a scream cut short. The clay pot shattered. The water swallowed her. Silence. The servants stood frozen for a moment. "Let's go," one whispered, trembling. They ran back to the palace, leaving no trace behind. But Uju, she stood there, her hands shaking. I didn't want this," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The next morning, Ngozi was nowhere to be found. "Maybe she ran away," the head servant said casually. But strange things began to happen. At night, whispers echoed through the palace halls. Footsteps, when no one was there. Water, dripping, even in dry rooms. One servant woke up screaming. "I saw her," she cried, "by the doorway. She was staring at me." Another fell ill suddenly, unable to speak. Her eyes filled with terror. One by one, the servants who had pushed Ngozi into the river began to suffer. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't eat. They saw things, heard things. The palace grew restless. Even the king began to notice. "This is not ordinary," he said gravely. One night during a heavy storm, Uju could no longer bear it. She ran to the king's chamber, shaking and drenched in rain. "My king!" she cried, falling to her knees. "I must speak." The king looked at her sternly. "What is it?" Uju took a deep breath, tears pouring down her face. "It is about Ngozi. She did not run away." The room fell silent. They pushed her into the river," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I was there, but I didn't stop them." The king's face darkened. "Guards!" he thundered. The guilty servants were brought forward, trembling. That same night, they were taken away to face punishment for their crime. The village chief priest was summoned the next day for solutions. The chief priest asked that some traditional rituals be performed in the palace, especially for those that committed the evil act. After that, all the servants went with the chief priest to the river. They really felt bad for what they did. They knelt down, crying and wailing, asking Ngozi and the river to forgive them. They later went back to the palace. The strange occurrences stopped. The whispers faded. The dripping water vanished, and the palace became quiet once more. Days later, the villagers gathered by the river. Some said if you listened carefully, you could still hear a soft voice carried by the wind. Not angry, not vengeful, just lingering, as if the river itself remembered. And from that day on, the elders would say, "Do no evil in secret, because the earth, the water, and the wind always tell the truth."